All right. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our fourth installment now of our Career Changers conversations, where we are essentially having conversations with individuals who left whatever their profession was at the time to join the teaching ranks. And it's a very important conversation we're having because, one, we know there is a dire need for teachers across the country, but specifically we're talking about the Kansas City area. But as well as we're talking about it because there are different alternative routes and ways for individuals to enter the teaching profession. So we just want to have a candid conversation with individuals who have made that jump from what is lab coat, suit and tie, whatever it is, into the classroom. And with that said, we understand there's a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions, a lot of wonderings that go into making that decision for a lot of individuals. So we thought, what best way to kind of maybe ease some of those concerns by hearing from individuals who have done that previously. So we're excited to conduct this series this month, and we are to our final segment, which is a different segment in a sense, because we are having our first guest who is not part of the Kansas City Teacher Residency. So there's a reason that our title says Kansas City Teacher Residency presents the Career Changing Conversations, because we understand that other individuals have gone another route. And even though we feel very strongly about our program, we're not here throughout these sessions to highlight particularly our program, but we're here to talk about the change in place. So this evening we have joining us Mr. Terrence Flowers. I'm very excited about this evening. Like myself, Terrence is a KCK native, dot born. So I'm excited to have him on this evening. He actually, we'll get into this here a little bit. So Terrence, welcome this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
No problem. So the first thing we like to do is kind of open it up the floor and allow you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background and what you did previously before entering the classroom. Then at the same time, talk about what you are teaching and where you are teaching at this time.
Okay. So yeah. So like you said, I'm actually from Florida originally, but I'm sort of I matriculated through the Kansas City, Kansas school system. I went to White Church Elementary, Eisenhower Middle School, Washington High School. Went to K State.
Hey, that's what makes you dot born though. So.
So I initially started out at school at Kansas State University and ended up graduating from Friends University. Got my bachelor's degree in business management and a master's degree in business law. And so I initially, I went into the corporate world. I started out in the mortgage industry. I started out on the retail side of the mortgage industry, the traditional loan officer route during the refinance boom of the, late 90s and the early 2000s. And did that for a while, and then I got onto the wholesale side, and then eventually the commercial side of the mortgage industry. Eventually, that sort of fizzled out just because of the economy, and so I got into the retirement industry. I started out the Boilermaker National Annuity Fund, and then eventually went over to JP Morgan, is where I sort of finished my career in the retirement industry. Went to JP Morgan, and then JP Morgan sold that particular facet of its business. And then I decided to, I just didn't want to be in the corporate world anymore. I tried my best, and I tried my best to make, to make strides, and I just wasn't happy there. So I jumped into the corporate. So I was able to gain entry into the Kansas City, Kansas Teaching Fellows program, and so now I teach computers at Carl Bruce Middle School, which is formerly Northwest Middle School for, like you said, our not natives. It was formerly Northwest Middle School.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to state real quick for anyone who is watching and might watch a little bit later, I'm going to ask you to bear with me this evening. For some reason, today of all days, I've been dealing with connectivity issues with my internet here and there. So as you might have saw me moving my mouth as you were talking, I was yelling at everyone in the house to turn their internet off on their phones to give me a little bit to work with this evening. So here and there, if it cuts out, I apologize, but we're going to stream ahead and try to get through this. So So with that said, and you talked about leaving the retirement industry, and some of it had to do with economy and things like that. But even then, what made you want to become a teacher?
Man, it was something I always wanted to do. It just, I've always enjoyed working with young people. I feel like young people keep you young. And so I worked with like the youth groups in church and things like that. So it was always something I had a passion for, just because to be honest with you, when I was a kid, I never really saw myself as a good student, but I ended up being, a pretty decent student. But that was just because there were people who believed in me and helped me, sort of find myself that way. So I always liked that. And I always wanted to be able to do that for another, for somebody else. So that's why, that's what sort of, steered me towards the classroom. It was just that once I had gone to school for, for business, and I didn't necessarily know how sort of switch gears and go a different direction. So I was able to find, an alternative certification program, which was a godsend, and it allowed me to transition into the classroom. Can you hear me still?
I can.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So, that allowed me to to transition into the classroom. It was it was a process, but it wasn't as long a process as, going back to school to receive another bachelor's degree and going the traditional route of student teaching and things like that. So, when I looked up alternative certification programs and I found the KCK Fellows program, it was like, I was elated, and yeah, and so that's how I ended up there. But it was always something I wanted to pursue. I just didn't know how to do it. So
Yeah, so let's talk about your process then. What was your process in determining what was going to be the best route for you? I mean, you kind of mentioned you didn't really see much value in going back to school completely from the jump, but you had to still do some searching, some researching to find out what was going to be the best route for you, because there are numerous programs out there. You've mentioned now you did take part in the Kansas City teaching fellow. So what was your process in determining the best route for you personally?
well, so what I did was I went out, I had a particularly bad day at work, and so I went and I just Googled alternative certification programs. And so there were several that popped up, but a lot of them involved a lot of it wasn't that I didn't see value. I just, like a lot of us, have family and things like that. And I wasn't able to, totally leave the workforce for an extended period of time to pursue, this, a new career. So I Googled alternative certification programs. And so back in probably 2009 or so, I had tried to get into the Teaching Fellows program. That was the only one I knew about at the time. Like you said, there's lots of them, but that was the one I particularly knew about. And I tried to get into the program, but at the time they only were accepting certain majors. And so when this happened, I Googled it again, and I called the central office, and I spoke to at the time the head of the program was Dr. Nix, Dr. Tracy Nix, and I spoke to Dr. Nix and just explained to her what I wanted to do. And so she had me come to an information session. And after I attended the information session, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I attended the information session. And so I had of course, an application process. I was selected in the application process to move to the next stage in the process, which was a pretty intense interview. It was all day, and it was with other people who were trying to get into the Teaching Fellows program. We had to prepare a lesson in our content area. We had to deliver the lesson, and which was crazy, as somebody who had never, other than, like I said, speaking to kids in a youth group, had never taught a lesson before in my life. So I had to actually deliver a lesson. And then it was a panel. Then there was a panel interview with people from HR and other teachers. So it was pretty intense. And so when I found out that I had actually gotten selected, I got selected in October of 2018 to be in the program, but it didn't start until the fall. I mean, the summer of 2019. And so it was real intense, but it was so much fun. And that's when I knew it's what I really wanted to do, as you know, in preparation for the interview, and actually, you know, preparing a lesson plan, which I had no clue how to do, no clue how to do, and actually preparing a lesson. And I remember that first lesson. I'm in front of, a teacher from Arrowhead Middle School, actually, so graciously allowed me to, teach in front of her class for, I believe it was a 20-minute lesson, which is, and it's all about that engagement. And luckily I was able to come up with some things that, the kids were interested in, and go from there, and then ultimately be selected for the program.
So I'm curious. So the KCK Teacher Fellows, for those who are not, I guess, familiar, it specifically works within the Kansas City, Kansas school district, and being a product of the KCK school district. How much did that play, if at all, in deciding to go with the Teaching Fellows, because it's kind of going back to your home base?
Yeah. Well, like I said, at the time, I only knew about the KCK Fellows program, but I will tell you this, though. Being teaching in KCK was very important to me. It was something, because I feel like I have a lot of pride in, coming from Wyandotte County. It's just it is, and I think we all do. And so it was amazing to be able to go back. Just the thought to be able to go back and but to to be a part of the matriculation of other kids who are going to come to that school. And just, that's what, and so I had my heart set on this. My plan was to go back, teach in KCK. I wanted to go back to my old high school. My goal was to go back to Washington High School and teach there. And obviously that didn't necessarily happen. Dr. Donnie Mitchell, who was the principal at Northwest, once I gained entry into the program, asked me if I would come and work at Northwest Middle School, which I was, elated to do. But yeah, I mean, KCK, that was what I wanted, because it's like, I get to tell my students all the time, I probably know your mother, your uncle, somebody. I know somebody in your family, and a lot of times they don't believe me until we're having FA day, or what we call parent-teacher conferences, and their parents walk in and say, "Oh, that's Terrence Flowers." And so there's that connection there, and I just, that's the part I love the most about it, is making that connection to the community and being able to be an example for the kids who are coming, just like I was several years ago.
No, I think that's key, and I think that's why, like, even when I came on here at the Kansas City teacher residency back in August, and I learned that one of the first things I was going to be working with a little bit was our conversations and movement into taking the program into KCK, because at the end of the day, for me, the program is important. However, ensuring that we have quality educators, and specifically for me back home, like you said, actually, when I started teaching, my first teaching job was at Schlegel High School, where I went to school, and 5 years after I left that place. So imagine going back in there as a 22, 23-year-old. And even, like I said, today, seeing that some of those students of mine, they bring their kids to my track program, or I've seen them through other avenues over the years, if it's doing the basketball stuff we were doing. So it's definitely some connection there. And thank you again for joining us. If you're just tuning in, this is Vernon Birmingham, the Talent and Placement Manager with the Kansas City Teacher Residency. In our fourth and final installment of this month with Career Changer Conversations with Mr. Terrence Flowers, who is a middle school teacher over in KCK at Carl Bruce Middle School, formerly known as Northwest Middle School. He's been gracious to spend some time with us this evening talking about his transition from the retirement business into education. And I can't help but now laugh a little bit when you say the retirement business. I just watched the movie a couple of nights ago. I care. I can't think of it now, but it was dealing with retirement people, and people was skewing them, getting over. Care a lot was the name of it, so you'll have to check that out. But one thing I'm curious about: how did you decide, or how did you land with your background within, um, retirement business? How did you decide on teaching computers and coding?
That's a funny story there. So I did not decide on that. Like I said, so what happened was I was at the central office, and I was delivering some paperwork to the central office for me to start in the fellows program. And I saw Dr. Mitchell there, and he said, "Hey, would you consider coming to Northwest?" And I was like, absolutely, that'd be awesome. And he said, "I have a computers position available." And I was like, wait a minute, that's not that's not what I wanted to teach. That's what I was thinking to myself. And so, it's like they say, you have a plan, you tell God your plan, he laughs, So I was, I went and I interviewed for the position. And, I mean, obviously I'm, adept in technology, but I didn't know that I could teach it. So what happened was once I was, offered the position in Northwest, they actually sent me away to a program called PLTW. So they sent me there to learn block coding. So I spent 2 weeks away that summer before I actually started in the classroom. So I went, I spent a week at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, which was, that was amazing. Went there, learned, about the curriculum there. And then I spent another week, actually came home that Saturday, and then went to another school. I went to actually the University of Central Missouri, where my son attends. I went there and did another week of training, very intense week of training. And so that's where I learned the curriculum and learned what I was going to be teaching and those things. But yeah, computers was never, that was never on my radar. But I've had a ball doing so. It's been a little bit difficult because of the with being virtual and everything. You think it's what the coding class I teach, it's it's probably easier to teach while you're in class, but yeah, that's how I came to teaching the computers though.
That is cool. Excuse me. So again, if you're just joining us, I ask you to bear with me at times this evening as I am dealing with connectivity issues, something I haven't dealt with in like 3 months, but I guess today is the day that it decides it wants to act up a little bit. So we're talking with Terrence Flowers this evening, and let's talk about what, you leaving a job or career that is comfortable, that's a lot of times you develop a lifestyle based upon your job at the time or your family situation, and making a jump, which for many people, not always the case, but for many people, we're even talking about a decrease potentially in salary and pay and things like that. So there's a lot of things that goes through an individual's mind when they're trying to decide if they're going to leave what they've been doing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years to go try something new. What reservations or fears did you have, if any, in making this decision to jump into the teaching ranks?
Well, of course, that's the one thing about being a teacher is I was, everybody tells you how much money you don't make. and to be honest with you, I've I was, blessed to have had a lot of education. So it was not as bad as I thought it would be. More so the reservations that I had were more so about, going into the program. So you have to, the Teaching Fellows program is pretty intense. So you go through what's called a summer boot camp and everything. So you can't work. Well, I guess you could work in the evenings, but generally you can't work during the day because during that summer we taught, which would be sort of our student teaching. So we taught, and then we then we took 3 graduate courses, and then like I said, I took an additional 2 courses. So my reservation was more so just, would I be able to sustain myself when I had to, leave work for basically, no work for 3 months. I mean, no income steady for, obviously my wife worked, and that obviously is a huge blessing. But, my portion, so it was more so probably her reservation because my income was going away for 3 months. So, but I made it work. I drove Uber. I did that, and I just, I made it work over that summer because it was something I definitely was, passionate about, about doing.
Yeah, it's kind of like you sit down and do a cost benefit analysis. Essentially, is what I'm hearing from a lot of individuals, especially when you go through that summer of not having a salary coming in and things like that, and even reservations sometimes, especially typically in an alternative program of some sorts, you have to do a lot of schooling and schoolwork and things like that. So you also start thinking about how is that going to affect family time, attending activities with your kids and all of those things. So there's a lot of things you really have to kind of sit down and think about when making that jump.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Like I said, I was gone, through the boot camp process. I was gone a lot during that first month, but then that second month I was gone. I mean, I was completely gone for 2 weeks. I was home, for a day, but for 2 weeks I was gone, and then school started. So the myth of having the summer off was shot, but it was worth it though. It was definitely worth it. It was just a lot of work and a lot of faith that went into
Right.
it.
So when you're thinking about going through the process, doing your cost benefit analysis, thinking about these reservations you may have, what made you actually just say, you know what, let's do it, let's go with it?
Well, I just I knew that I could not. I just didn't feel like I was that I'm just speaking for myself. I just didn't feel like I was effective in what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was moving forward in what I was doing, and I'm not trying to place that anywhere other than it just wasn't what I had a passion for. And so I think when you don't have a passion for something, you, even with your best effort, you it just comes across. And so I just felt like this was something that I wanted to do, something that I felt like I should do. And so I just sort of went for it all in, and I decided that is what I want to do. I mean, it was, and I'll tell you, even on my worst day, and I've had some bad ones, but on my worst day, I still enjoy what I do now more than what I did then. I mean, I miss some of the people, but I don't miss the work, if that makes sense.
Right. No, it makes total sense. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. If you are tuning in or just tuning in, this is Vernon Birmingham, Talent and Placement Manager with the Kansas City Teacher Residency, joined this evening by Mr. Terrence Flowers as he talks about his transition from his previous career in the retirement business to that of an educator. So we're having a conversation about what that looked like for him personally. It's been helpful for, I've heard from individuals over the last few weeks who've tuned in and they thought that this was very helpful. So I thank you for joining us in this. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, Terrence is unique in the sense that he was not a resident of the residency program. He actually went through another alternative route. However, I believe his insight is valuable for individuals who are thinking about entering teaching. So with that said, and again, let me also add, if you're joining us, I am having some connectivity issues at times, so it might chop up here and there. Just bear with us, and again, my apologies for that. So Terrence, when you went into teaching after going through your summer kind of boot camp and training, what did you expect going in? And the second part of that question is, how did those expectations um, coincide with reality?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm gonna tell you, there's nothing can really compare. You know, I expected it to be tough, and because it was going to be a new, just a new venture all together. But it was tough, not be, but only because when you realize, when you're standing in front of that group of students, you're standing in front of them, you really realize they're looking at you. Hold on a second, is my internet, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. What you, okay, perfect. Yeah, you realize they're looking at you, and it's almost like they're like sponges, and they're looking at you, and they're hanging on your word, and really wanting to soak up what you have to tell them. And so that really, the brevity of that really hit me, that, you know, that I was responsible, in, you know, somewhat responsible for, you know, the information that these kids were going to, you know, take away from that class. And so that weighed a lot on me, because, you know, you go through all the training, and you go through all the books, and you go through all the theory, and even the summer school somewhat prepares you, but I, you know, my summer school coordinating teacher, hopefully she's watching, but she told me, she said, you know, because in my summer school class I had like 8 kids, 9 kids. She was like, yeah, this is cute, but when when I got to the building, I had, you know, I think my first class had 34 kids, you know, and so it's a lot different, but I mean, it's still an amazing, you know, opportunity that I feel blessed to have every day.
So let's go back to your first year. Last year was your first year, right?
Last year,
And it kind of got, of course, you know, we ran into a abrupt interruption. But talk about a little bit about your first year. What do you remember that sticks out from that first year? Let's even go back to first semester when you were in the classroom.
yeah. So the first semester, I'll say the first day, the thing that really stuck out to me is that you really have to. I'll say this: what I really learned, and I heard this going through it. You really have to earn the kids' respect. You, just because you put on dress clothes and stand in front of a kid and you say you're Mr. XYZ, that means absolutely nothing. It really does. It means nothing. You really have to earn the respect. And so I mean, you know, we were kids. So, you know, how when you walk into a room and you see the substitute, how you know, you sort of, you know, it's almost like, you know, like blood in the
I know
water.
it's like.
And so that's the way it was for the first, you know, probably 2 or 3 weeks. It was like that, you know, because they were testing me, and they, you know, and it wasn't until I earned their respect, and then that's when things like, you know, you weren't dealing with, you know, some of the adolescent angst that you deal with as a teacher weren't quite as bad. Either I got used to it, or they stopped doing it. I don't know which one, but yeah, it's just, that was the biggest transition. It wasn't the content. It wasn't the content, that sort of comes.
Right.
But it was earning those kids' respect, earning, you know, getting to know their names, and you know, and learning to say their names correctly, and, you know, and learning that, you know, some kids, it truly, it is true that some kids, you know, their name is John Smith on the roll, but they don't want to be called that, and respecting that, and just respecting them as people. And after a while, you just start to chip away, and then the respect comes, and then the behavior problems somewhat subside. You're still going to deal with it. You're teaching, so you're still going to deal with some of that, but it starts to subside, and then, you know, and then you can really, and that's when it starts to be really fulfilling, because you're building those relationships with those kids, and that's probably I think that's probably the most important. But that was the part that you know, I remember I had a particularly, you know, because 8th graders are like, it's funny, because I had all 3 grades. I had 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders, and I had 2 classes of each. And it was really strange, because the 6th graders were like, they were like 5th graders. They were, you know, they were little kids. But the 8th graders were like, they were like adults, and they talked and acted like adults, and it's kind of intimidating at first, but once you sort of earn their respect, they, you know, because I had 8th graders calling me Terrence, And I didn't know how to deal with that. It's like, you cannot call me Terrence. And it didn't, I mean, they didn't care, but it was after I earned their respect came. But you literally, you know, you can't yell at a kid and say, I'm an adult. They don't care.
Right.
You know, so that was the biggest transition in my first semester. And I started to see that, you know, in the second semester, I'm an elective teacher. So that was one of the cool parts about being an elective teacher is the things that I did really wrong in the first semester. I had a whole new crop of students, and that may sound bad, but it's not. I had a whole new crop of students in the second semester that I could say, okay, I didn't do this well, but I'm going to change it in the second semester, and I saw the immediate results from that. So.
No, I think that's clutch, and like yourself, I was an elective teacher, and it makes a big difference sometimes. You know, of course, you can keep the same kids all year. Those expectations are in place. But I remember when I started teaching, probably the best piece of advice, again, I went in 22, 23-year-old teaching at a high school with 16, 17. And remember the advice I received was, don't go in, try to be the cool teacher. Don't try to be the friend teacher or the one. He's like, go in, you know, earn that respect, be a little tougher. And always like, it's easier to be tough and lighten up.
Exactly.
And try to be light and try to get tough with them later, because they'll start like, what are you talking about? You let this go for the last 2 months. So that piece is good advice there that you kind of touched on a little bit. So again, thank you for joining us. And as I've stated numerous times, because I keep seeing it happen, bear with us as we're dealing with some technical issues at times. I'm trying to solve it, having connectivity issues. I'm texting everyone in the house, unplug your Fire Sticks, take your phone off of the internet. I'm trying everything right now to help solve this problem. And again, today is the first day I dealt with it in a while, but we're here with Terrence Flowers this evening. And your first year teaching, let's talk about it real quick again. What kept you up at night during that first year as a teacher? Was there anything that kind of kept you up and kept you thinking?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I never felt like the lesson plan was strong enough. That was, you know, just me. I never felt like it was strong enough. I always, in just making sure that I was prepared. I never felt prepared enough. Even though I had the curriculum in front of me and knew what I was going to do, I just never felt prepared. And even in the times that I did feel like I was prepared, you know, I feel like I'd have a really solid plan and a really solid lesson. There'd always be something that sort of, you know, took me off track. And that kept me up a lot of mornings, you know, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out, you know, making sure I had enough and making sure everything was solid enough and making sure that I was going to be, you know, just good enough that day. So yeah, that was the biggest thing that kept me up, just making sure that I was going to be good enough, because I didn't want to be just somebody who was just standing there. I wanted to, want to make, be a good representation. And so that was, I've never really considered myself perfectionist, but that really did keep me up at night, making sure that I was prepared enough.
No, that's good piece there. And even if you add on to that a little bit, even with those thoughts of staying up at night and having those concerns, you eventually realize that you were doing all right. And it's probably some of those anxieties or things that a lot of new teachers kind of think about, but it's just continue to reassure individuals who are thinking about going to it. It all works itself out. Everything turns out okay. And typically, specifically, if you have the support, you end up doing a good job that first year. And if you're joining us, I just typed it in the comments as well. But if you have any questions for Terrence, I'm going back and forth to the Facebook page here and there. If you have any questions specifically about entering the teacher profession and things of the like. But let's talk about what from your previous profession have you utilized or has been helpful for you as a teacher?
That's a great question. probably the ability, in the corporate world, there's a saying, the only thing constant is change. And so I feel like being in the corporate world for all those years, change did not freeze me. I was able to, adapt relatively quickly to things that happened. And, just being in high pressure situations, especially early on in my career when I was in sales, being, with that constant pressure, that I think crosses over very well to the classroom, because sometimes there are some pressure situations, especially if you're dealing with a behavior issue or something like that, that allows you to, bring that situation down instead of escalating the situation. And if it's already at a frenzy. Hello? Okay. Yeah, it's
Bear with
already
me.
sort of a frenzy situation. Oh, good.
Give me a second here, Terrence. I don't know how it's coming for others, but
Sure.
my unstable internet is making it pretty choppy here. Give me a second here.
Good.
I'm gonna try one more thing real quick.
Okay.
I wish I had that screen now where I can say, please stand by, or just give me a quick second.
Good.
All right, let's try that again. And again, I apologize if you're tuning in. If you've watched all the other sessions, we have not had these problems, but my internet is failing me this evening. But I didn't catch much of what you were saying there about what you're saying, Terrence. So if you could kind of touch back a little bit on
Yeah.
what from your previous profession has helped you as a teacher.
Yeah. So just the ability to adapt to change. Yeah. In the corporate world, a lot of things, change very quickly and very high paced, and things that are, there may be a policy that you have at noon, but at 1 o'clock it's totally changed, and you just have to put that into place very, very quickly. And so that's one thing I took, one of many things I took away from my my previous experience. Also, just the ability to operate in high pressure situations. Uh, Being a teacher, there's you got a lot to do. And 45 minutes or 50 minutes may seem like a long time, but it's not. There's a there's a lot going on, and you have to be able to sort of stick to that, and stay on schedule. There were many times where I'd look up and class would be over and I didn't feel like I got anything done. But just being able to adapt to those situations, and just be able to adapt to change, that was one of the biggest things that I took from my previous experiences uh, into the classroom.
All right, thank you for sharing that. And again, thank you for bearing with us as we're limping towards the finish line here. As I'm dealing with some unstable internet this evening, so continue to bear with us, and I apologize for that. But we're going to keep plugging away. We have, as my Ring doorbell keeps going off time and time again. Talk a little bit about, when an individual is leaving their profession to do something new, specifically teaching. We know it's not an easy task. We know there's a lot that goes into that. What kind of support system did you have in play? And of course, you probably had some support from individuals within the teaching fellows, and probably individuals from your school at the time, Northwest, before it switched to Carl, Bruce. But what support systems did you have in play personally outside of those means to help get you through these early months, days, years as a teacher?
Well, man, of course, my wife was a huge support. Like I said, I couldn't have did it because, like you said, we're taking away, you have two income family, and you're taking away one income for a significant period of time, basically a quarter of a year. So my wife, obviously, and then, my son, my oldest boy, my son Jordan, there were a lot of times that, he sort of, helped out with his little brother and sister, and just, getting them to where they needed to go. I remember sometimes, and even my little kids, you know, I have an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old, you know, and there were sometimes I had to take them to my class with me. You know, we on Fridays we had class from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening, and so you know, my wife had to work and my son had to work. They'd go to class. You know, my father-in-law, he would come up and get them. So I have tremendous family support, and I couldn't have did any of that without those people. They helped out a lot. Like I said, just my father-in-law coming up and getting my kids, my little kids, because they were literally sitting in the kitchenette of the classroom, you know, and of course you can't expect kids to sit there all day long. So I had tremendous family support. I wouldn't be able to do it without them. And I don't say that to pander at all. I mean, that's legitimate. It's without my family, I wouldn't have been able to sustain myself through those 3 months. And
I think that's, go ahead.
And then the people in the fellows program, I mean, I'm in cohort 14 of the fellows program, and we gelled so quickly as a group, you know, and just in our support of one another. But yeah, I mean, some of those, I feel like those people will be, it's like we were like all had our backs against the wall and just sort of, we were all, you know, going through this all at the same time. So those people, you know, I feel like I have, you know, friends for life and everybody who I've gone through the fellows program with.
Yeah, so that's good because I mean, what I've been hearing every week thus far, and just from my experience as well, you know, if you're going to think about leaving your profession to go into the teaching field, you know, ask yourself what type of support system can you depend on when you have in play, because it's going to be crucial, like you said, especially if you're going to be taking classes and having to do things in there, having a support system in play is definitely critical to understanding that again, not only are you doing a new job completely, but you're also going to school as well. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about this move here. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. This is Vernon Birmingham with Kansas City Teacher Residency with Terrence Flowers, and we're winding down here in the last few, you know, conversational topics. But let me jump into this one. Why was it important, or if it was, why was it important to you to enter the education profession?
Well, like I said, I never really, it was probably, you know, later on in my educational career that I really started to feel like I was a, you know, a somewhat competent student. And that was, you know, for several reasons. But I just wanted to be an example for somebody who, you know, who was in that same, you know, situation, who didn't really feel like they were, you know, a strong student, but just to show, you know, that it could be done. You know, one of our ICs, Mrs. Eichert, she always says, you know, she said this to me many times, and she said, she says representation matters, and it really does, because I remember, you know, in high school, I saw, you know, I had teachers and administrators, you know, I had, you know, from top to bottom, you know, all walks, but the ones who look like me are the ones that I, you know, sort of got a lot of inspiration from, you know, people who you see they look like you, and even at times, you know, they were able to, say stuff to you that maybe somebody else wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have come across the same. And so I always appreciated that. Like people like my principal in high school, my assistant principal, Mr. Ellison, you know, people like that, you know, I wanted to be that for somebody else. And so that was, you know, that was one of the things. And you know, Dr. Mitchell, he was crazy. He was actually one of my teachers in my senior year of school. And so, you know, I wanted to be that for another kid, you know, so somebody who can look at, you know, so they can see that you can do anything you want, and have those people there that, you know, that you can say, that you can point to and say, I want to do this, and have a concrete example of somebody there.
I'm glad you said that because actually goes right into what I was going to touch on or ask next. And you said it. You said representation matters. And of course, that's a conversation we're having consistently in education. There's a lot of great organizations around Kansas City metro area like Block and the Black Males Educators group, because we understand representation matters. And I kind of posted earlier on Facebook, we can get into the statistics because everyone seems to know them now. We know that 7% of teachers in our country are Black, 2%, give or take, less than that or a little bit more, are Black men. So we know it's important. And I'll be completely transparent here. And when I started teaching, it was because I wanted to coach. And I was like, well, if I'm going to coach, I need to teach. That's kind of what you thought. However, once I was in the school, that's when I started seeing it. And I've experienced it before because I had strong Black educators. I always kind of joke. My first teacher ever in kindergarten was a Black lady. Yeah. But that was the only one I saw through elementary. There was one more I didn't have, but there was one more in middle school at Coronado Middle School. I had a few, and in high school, of course, you had a couple, had a few, and the ones who made an impact, like you said, were like a Johnny Stevenson, who actually taught my dad as well, and wouldn't take any stuff. So once I got into the school, I saw how important it was for me being in there. And what was cool for me at the time, myself and two of my classmates from high school were back teaching in high school, and Corey Hall, who was a year older than me. So we were all back into the same school that we taught in, because we understood once we got in there how important it was. So what's your thoughts on, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but, and I guess, let me add this as well. Next Wednesday, we're actually going to have a conversation at noon on our Facebook page about a new initiative that we're part of called the Black Educators Initiative, where we're trying our best to recruit and retain and support Black educators within Kansas City. And we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of things that we're doing to help with that, like scholarship assistance for the grad school portion, mental support, as you definitely probably know is important being an educator. But let's talk a little bit about the need of more Black educators, and let's talk a little bit about Black men in our schools.
Yeah, I think we need, since becoming an educator, that's one of the things I really try to champion, that just personally, just talking to guys, if they've ever thought about it, at least, think about it, because these young men need to see you in the schools. They need to see you, because here's the thing, you got some of these young men are, and I'm not saying all of them, obviously, but some of these young men, are they're kids in grown men bodies, and they don't understand, and there's all these hormones, and they don't understand what that's about. And they need to know, and they need to have somebody that they can come, sometimes come and just talk to about what's going on with them. Sometimes, if they're, Vernon, you there?
I'm here. I turned my camera off to see if that might help a little bit.
Oh, okay. But yeah, just like, sometimes there's frustration that they may be having, and they need to know that somebody's.
Bear with us here for a second as we connect again.
Okay.
Are you there, Terrence?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, go ahead. You can continue. I was there for most part. I just turned my camera off to see if that would help with the internet.
Yeah. So it's just, they just need to know that they can go to somebody and be able to speak to them, or even just look at them and say, that's where I want to be one of these days. One of the things my wife and I've always tried to do is always try to take our boys around other Black men, so that they know that their family wasn't the only one that was sort of the traditional family, or so that they saw other people who were trying to do the same things. And I don't want to jump way out there with that, but what I mean is just see people who are doing what everybody else is trying to do. And so as an educator, I just feel like I just want to be an example, and I tell you, it's made me change up a lot of things. Just, from I've always sort of cared about my appearance, but and still though, just, everything, just being an example on, how I how I leave the house, how I act when I'm outside the house, how I act when I'm on social media, the things that I say. My wife is laughing over here because I said that. But I just want to be that example. And I think that, that Black men need to see that, because and we can understand what's going on. I don't know the exact statistics, but there's a direct correlation to young Black men getting suspended in school and then going to, in their encounters with law enforcement. But everything that happens doesn't need to be a suspendable offense. Sometimes
Right.
they just need to talk. And I think that, if you have more people who are culturally sensitive to what's going on, and maybe that starts with having, these, having more of us in the classroom. Like you said, I mean, I was fortunate to have some, but I still felt like there was, there could be more. And I just wish that more Black men would think about that as a profession. Think about this as a profession.
No, that's good, and I'm upset here because it was choppy here and there. Not as bad as earlier. So there's a lot of good stuff that might got cut in and out there. So this is a frustrating evening, if I must say so for myself here, especially after having weeks of successful, and this is successful as well. Just frustrates me. But I'm still glad that we have the platform to be able to do that this evening, and even sharing the things that you shared is crucial. One thing you said was in the stats, specifically talk about when Black and brown kids see representation of themselves in the classroom in elementary school plays a huge factor and role if they're going to graduate high school and go on to higher education or a trade or entrepreneurship or whatever that may be. So it's important. And like you said, it's important for us. And the thing about me is, I taught for 7 years. However, even though I left the classroom, I've been in education this whole time in some way, shape, or form. If it's through entrepreneurship organization, where again, I spent a lot of time with some of the initiatives, being able to take Black and Hispanic kids all over the country to different conferences and training sessions, because we understand the value in that. So again, if you're joining us, we're going to wrap up here, and I want to ask you, Terrence, what piece of advice you would give to someone who's thinking about making this? One thing you said that was important earlier, I want to reiterate on it real quick before you answer this question. And the question is, one piece of advice you would give someone thinking about making this change. But the thing that you said that I think is very important to highlight is, please consider it. Think about it. Consider it. Again, think about your pluses and minuses. However, think about it, because we understand that educators are needed right now. Individuals who care, individuals who have a passion for the young people, individuals who understand that the passion towards our young people will help shape a community as a whole. You're touching classrooms, you're touching families, you're touching generations, especially in that elementary, middle school age group. So Terrence, what piece of advice you would give someone who's thinking about making the change or considering making the jump from some other career into becoming an educator?
Yeah. The thing that, everybody will have a bunch of conversations about what needs to happen. And I say, if you just consider it. And even if it's a situation where you don't want to, maybe you do your cost benefit analysis and you can't take the financial hit. But man, be a volunteer. Be a volunteer in the hallways. Be a volunteer in the classroom. Maybe go to an organization like you said that does work with entrepreneurship. One of the people that I still see to this day. As a matter of fact, he's one of my fraternity brothers. His name is Leon Franklin, and to this day, I still call him Mr. Franklin. And he tells me all the time, we're frat brothers, man. You don't got to call me, but I can't call Leon. I can't call Dr. Mitchell Donnie. I have respect for him.
Right.
And so be that for somebody else. If you can't go, if you don't want to, go into the classroom, volunteer, do something, go to, coach, if you have an opportunity to do it, but at least consider it, because it makes such a huge difference in the life of these young men. It really does. Some of them will act tough and act like they don't. I mean, and the young ladies as well. They'll act tough, like they don't, like they don't care, but they do. They do. And like I said, even on my toughest day in the classroom, and I've had some days where I couldn't believe. I'm like, my God, this is nuts. What's going on in this room? But I still love what I do, and sometimes I'll just sit, and I'm not trying to be corny or anything like that, but sometimes I just really feel blessed to have the opportunity that I have, because you are really having an opportunity to touch lives, and just to make a difference. And whether you realize it or not, you're making a difference in these kids' lives. You really are. And it's the black, brown, the Asian, the kids who are majority status as well. You are making a huge impact in their lives. And I love being out in the and seeing kids and them come up to me. But I just think that you should at least consider it. If there's an informational program about any of these alternative certification programs, and especially if you're not really happy with what you're doing, at least consider it. I guarantee you'll enjoy what you do. Even if you don't stay for long, you'll enjoy what you do. And I'm not going anywhere. I know that. I've torn my corporate resume up, so I'm not going anywhere.
No, you actually said something that's important. It actually goes with one of the questions that was dropped in the comments, but I'm going to touch on something real quick you said, because I think it's important. Even if you're considering and not sure, we actually, within our program for sure, we get a lot of individuals who are substitute teaching and, trying it out first and doing a run and see if this is what I really want to do. Can I handle this every day of the week? At least in sub, you can tap out some days and like, no, I'm good today. But you try it out and decide if it's what you really want to do. But you just said something that goes with the last question I'm going to ask that was dropped in the comment section is, what keeps you going as a teacher? What is it that keeps you going?
Just knowing that they expect me to be there, and that I make a difference in, every day. I make a difference in, and I look, there's a lot of images. They'll show you a lot of images about what they believe us to be, about what, and just being the total opposite of what they want to tell you we are. And I enjoy being there, and I enjoy, just the interaction that I have with students. I was thinking about this earlier. I have a whole new playlist of music that that I didn't know anything about before I started working with kids on a daily basis. So I just love the interaction, and I love the interaction I have with my colleagues. Just even though I only get to see them, maybe 2 or 3 minutes in the hallway, but I really just enjoy what I do. I enjoy the curiosity of being a teacher, because that's one thing you have to be, is curious. You have to be willing to be a lifelong learner. I probably wasn't, if I'm being honest, I wasn't the biggest, reader of outside books. I've become more so. And you just have to be curious. And I think that just being that lifelong learner, that keeps me going. And then, like I said, just the kids. I truly enjoy being there for them. I started, just being there for them. Like, when they'll roast me sometime, and I'm okay with that. But it's all in fun. I just enjoy my interactions every day with the kids.
No, that is awesome, and that's what it's about. Terrence, thank you for being gracious enough to spend some time with us this evening, and being gracious enough to battle through my unstable internet connection this evening. I have Google Fiber. I'm not running any bootleg internet out of. It's just decided to want to be unstable. tonight. So thank you for being gracious enough to spend the time with us this evening. Very, very grateful for the conversation, the insight that you provided, especially for me. You know, a lot of these conversations we've had from individuals within our kind of organization per se. So being able to kind of see a lot of similarities that go in place when individuals are thinking about making this jump into the teacher profession. So thank you for spending the time with us this evening. Those of you who watched live, jumped on and off here and there, thank you for joining us. And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties this evening. But again, join us next Wednesday at noon on our Facebook page. We're going to talk about our Black Educators Initiative and the things that we're trying to do to, again, attract and retain more Black teachers within Kansas City community. So thank you for joining us this evening, Terrence. Again, thank you for spending time with us for this hour, and we will see you all hopefully next Wednesday.
All
Take
right,
care.
thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it, sir.